available with you information that might help or should have helped you already to identify priorities in different areas of attention. In particular, the criteria to be used in priority assessments needs to have health and environmental impacts considerations, mainly for POPs, but also in relation to other chemicals that you might be using as well. From phase 2, from inventories, you do not only have information, data, statistics, and numbers. You can also have identify gaps, and that is also a very important element to really establish priorities. A gap sometimes means it's not necessary to have that information, but sometimes means we have to work more on this because it might make a difference in the whole set of establishing objectives for the management of POPs. And those objectives can go both in the short, medium, or long term, depending on your national situation and the capacities you might be able to be using in time-wise. So to start with, one important thing to remember and to consider is that the Stockholm Conventions, and for those chemicals that are listed in Annex A and B, the life cycle concept is there. You'll have different articles in the Stockholm Convention which are banning, restricting either production or use, export or import of certain POPs. But not only that, you might have already identified stockpiles, wastes, and contaminated sites. And in here, the legislation might be regarding to international law, like the Stockholm Convention, or your national frameworks. Some countries already have very good contaminated sites programs, for example. Some others are not even in the phase of identifying them. For Stockholm, contaminated sites might not be priority. What it is only requested is the identification of them. But this can trigger many other potential issues regarding it, in particular when you are thinking of the health of workers or in the health of certain populations. With this concept of risk management and life cycle assessment, the national implementation plans are needed. As you might have heard before, the NIPs are considered the roadmap to implement the convention, because in there you need to have a look at all the articles and strategize, make planning. But for doing that in a way that it is feasible, implementable, and practical, you need to establish priorities. Then your plans will be really something that can be done, maybe not easily, but that are feasible to be done. For this, there are many different guidance available at this moment. You have guidance for assessment of pesticides, which are the general FAO guidance. You have guidance to take or undertake inventories on PFOS and BDEs. Those guidance are being revised at this moment with the comments provided by parties, and also guidance on best available techniques and best environmental practices for fluorinated and brominated flame retardants listed in the Stockholm Convention. There are also some other guidance and documents that might be useful. One is related to customs control. It's just giving some highlights of some issues related to export and import and some considerations. For example, those chemicals that have exemptions, which should be the good things to have a look at before importing or exporting certain chemicals. There are also guidelines or guidance related to analytical control, sampling, screening of the POPs that were listed in 2009 mainly. And there is a document that's called Labeling Initial Considerations, and that is addressing the issue of prevention mainly, and a way to identify those articles or products that might be within your national borders and you'd have no clue of what they have. So this is a thought starter to start really finding or looking for ways to for prevention. Those of you that are very familiar with Stockholm might be aware that HBCD was the last chemical listed, hexabromocyclododecan, and there is a specific mandate related to labeling. Therefore, it's something that might be important to consider as a part of your planning in the future for these plans. So to start with, it is important to have a picture of the situation. This slide and the ones that will follow is just a quick overview of potential key problems with those POPs that are listed in Annex A and B. This, of course, will vary completely from one country to another, depending on the type of industries that you have, the type of productions that you have, and the type of legislations that you have as well. So if we start talking about alpha and beta HCH, for example, one of the biggest problems in relation to these two chemicals are the facts of stockpiles. As you know, they are not chemicals that are intentionally produced. They come with the other isomer, the gamma HCH, the lindane, and by banning production of lindane, they are to be controlled. In any case, the main problems are related to those existence, those things that you already have, or to contaminated sites. Mainly, those countries that have formerly produced lindane might need to have a look at it, or those that have imported lindane in big quantities as well, because they could have come with it. But in any way, they are dead chemicals at this stage. As you know, lindane was listed in 2009 with a specific exemption for use, not for production. Therefore, lindane at this moment should be less and less in existence. Pesticides such as chlordecone, pentachlorobenzene, well, lindane again, and endosulfan are pesticides which it's important to have a look not only at contaminated sites or stockpiles as the ones before, but also in maybe some ban or restriction measures that might be needed to put in place. In the case of endosulfan, it's a little different. It was listed in 2011, and in this regard, this is a chemical that has exemptions that are related to crops and pests. And in this case, production is allowed, which is different from lindane. In any case, having an idea of big themes with these chemicals might give also idea of how to make priorities. If you never produced lindane, production of lindane can be easily banned, for example, and that could be a very simple measure for countries to undertake, for example. With the industrial chemicals, the situation is a little different and similar in a way. In the case of HBB, hexabromodiphenyl, it seems that it's no longer in use worldwide, and this has been a situation for many years. Therefore, dealing with it should not be complicated. It's a flame retardant as the other brominated diphenyl esters that are listed in the convention, but there is no register of it still being used or produced. In this case, enforcement again of restrictions or potential bannings, dealing with stockpiles, identifying contaminated sites is important, as well as the issue that both the brominated compounds and the fluorinated ones are or have been used in many articles. Those articles that are now in use can keep on being in use, but they will become waste sooner or later. Therefore, the waste coming from these articles is something to consider. In this regard, if you have had a look to the guidance on making inventories, it's mainly addressing articles that might contain those chemicals. In the case of brominated flame retardants, the two main sectors where it was used is the transport sector and the electric and electronic equipment sector. And in both cases, now the use has been stopped. Information is telling that after 2004, it was no longer put intentionally in those articles, at least in those countries that have reported. So what is the main issue then with the brominated diphenyl ethers is the fact that the Conference of the Parties, when listing them, decided to grant a recycling exemption. That recycling exemption goes until 2030. And of course, the final disposal of those articles might not happen right now, but they could go into the recycled materials. Therefore, they might be around in certain levels of concern. And that's also another interesting issue that the Basel Small Intersessional Working Group has worked on, and therefore to really determine if an article might be considered a hazardous waste or not, those limits of POPs low-level content should be completely defined and adopted by the COP. In the case of PFOS, we can say that it has a little parallelism with endosulfan in a way that it was listed with many exemptions and acceptable purposes. Acceptable purposes do not have a specific deadline, so PFOS can keep on being used for them. In this category or sector, you may find, for example, aviation hydraulic fluids. In the issue of exemptions are allowed and parties can register for them, but it's also important to have in mind at this moment that PFOS might come a priority regarding to the exemptions, because the COP will need in May to decide if the exemptions will expire or if the exemptions will come into an end. If that's so, for those chemicals listed in 2009, or for those that the COP decides, August this year, August 2015, will be the final deadline for using or producing these chemicals. In that regard, what will come as a problem or will come as a key issue is again the stockpile situation or those articles that are starting to become wastes. So, having said some important and very big facts about the chemicals listed, we are starting to get into a methodological approach where we talk about of an initial phase which can be defined as qualitative assessment. And in this regard, the idea is to have an overview of general information that might come either from POP-ROC old documents in the risk management evaluations, guidance documents, or even in the register. So in that qualitative assessment, the idea is to check for those countries that are producing and exporting, to check production and analyze also the export information. Mainly here, industry associations or exporters are key to provide information. For other countries which are only users and importing countries, instead of analyzing the export information, import information might be critical, in particular if certain conditions are not there to guarantee that these chemicals or these articles are not entering the borders, and the relevant industries or associations might also be of great importance in identifying these cases. So first we were talking about a qualitative assessment, and we are here talking about some kind of risk management measures that can be selected or chosen, and what it is essential is to see which is a priority, what we call a first line of defense. And for that, the idea is that we have POPs besides us. We have brominated flame retardants to dispose of. We have still production and use of fluorinated compounds. But what can we do? Maybe a good approach is to start avoiding new POPs in our borders in the future. Therefore, any potential legislations, control measures, identifying alternatives are really important information to have. What is the socioeconomic impact that might have? Are we talking about recycling, or are we talking about production of certain chemicals? Do we have legislation? Is it enforceable, the legislation? Do we have any control on the situation at the national level? If we can ask and answer this very simple type of questions, avoiding new POPs in the future might be very simple to address from the theoretical point of view. Also, if you are using, for example, endosulfan for a specific crop or pest complexes, you have to think that those exemptions might expire as well very soon. So limiting exemptions or acceptable purposes in the case of PFOS might also be a way of establishing targets that to comply with the Stockholm, but also to really go forward the phase out of POPs, which is the final goal of the convention. If you have identified specific exemptions or acceptable purposes where you still need to use them, it is very important to notify them. In that regard, it will be very easy to make informed decisions, or maybe very difficult to make informed decisions, but the important part is to be aware of the situation. Now you might be knowing that Lindane exemption might expire. No country has requested an extension of that exemption. Therefore, it seems that it's no longer needed. Some information might not be exactly like that for all countries, but it's important to have that into considerations. The other thing is when you are having new facilities, for example, BAT and BEP should be used. And if you are doing that, you are minimizing risks. This is, of course, part of phase 2, which means the inventory that you have to do, and to understand not only how many computers you might have or how many used cars are in your country that might be having brominated flame retardants, but also the legislation that you have, the impact that you might be causing with this. And, of course, the economic impact that this might have. Second line of defense is you have POPs in your home, in your country. You have to identify and manage them. So first step is avoid new. The second one is you have them, you have to manage and identify them. For this, the main or the key situation, as we were talking before, is the presence in articles. Therefore, you need inventories. Of course, the inventories might not be accurate, but even if they are not accurate, they can provide you an idea of what might be or can be a priority. Notification, if you are using articles that contain these POPs as well, is an important information to have, and that's not information for the Secretariat, it's information for the Conference of the Parties to make the decisions. And identifying stockpiles, waste, and contaminated sites is also something to not forget, and that you will be seeing, it's repeated very frequently, and that is showing a lot of importance of the life cycle. It's not only banning the production or the use, but how to manage afterwards the situation with the POPs at national level. So what can be some elements for selecting efficient measures for the NIPS implementation. One element towards the priority setting can be the risks that are coming from releases of each of the new POPs. That is very hard to do in a quantitative assessment, so maybe through different research that you have or information that you might be able to gather in your countries, you can categorize that into high, medium, or low, and therefore you start to making some kind of matrices or some kind of tables where you might identify which are the biggest problems. For example, if you are a country that pesticides are essential for you, endosulfan might be, or the risk from reducing the use of endosulfan might be of high category for you. Risk reduction potential of risk management measures, and this is talking mostly in the different stages of the life cycle as well. What are the type of resources you need? Do you need capacity, human capacity? Do you need investments? Do you need funds? Do you need sources from the government, for example? And that can also provide an idea of different categories of high, medium, or low ranges. The resources needed is really key in this, and some things are not really very resource needed type of measures. They can be very simply done, but they can take a very long time. So that's also an issue to consider. Do you have people that are available with the expertise that it is needed? Maybe you have people with the expertise needed, but they are not available for doing certain things because they have to also do others. And there comes again the priorities and how to establish priorities afterwards. Do you have infrastructure? Do you need laboratories? Do you need techniques? Do you need information about that? Do you have enough people to control in the borders? Is that needed? Those are the type of questions that can help identifying if a measure that you decide can be implemented in the conditions of your country or not. The other important questions to answer, and the answer will give, again, the category of high, medium, or low, is the characteristic of the measure. Is it practical? Is it enforceable by the party, or are we asking to change cultural patterns which are not feasible in the short term? Therefore, that measure should be taken in a very, very long term with resources that you might not have. Is it practical? Do we need to train people to do that? Can it be done immediately? So this priority setting process, you'll have measures that could be considered very efficient, measures that cannot be considered efficient. Therefore, you need to start with something. For that, as we were saying, a qualitative analysis might be a very good basis for discussions, for planning, for making priorities. Also, it might provide the opportunity for a party to think of projects that they might need in the near future, or to discuss with other partners or with other countries in the region if they're having situations that are very similar. Sometimes what it is important, what it is needed is some kind of guidance towards establishing some targets. Sometimes what you need goes beyond that, and you need to start making assessments of that are most quantitative assessments. But what it is very important is that the measure that you're trying to implement really can meet all the criteria. Implementable, practicable, that you can do it in your country with no many problems. And if that's so, what are the solutions to solve that those problems are and those situations? So Here, this slide keeps on trying to express some ideas to select the most efficient measures for NIP implementation. And some of these things we have already discussed. This tries to be, in a way, a summary of many things. And in here, what I would like to address is the need to identify not only the sizes of the problems, but the shape of the problems. I always give this same example, but if you are looking at an elephant, you might be looking at a baby elephant, or you might be looking at an adult elephant. The shape would be very similar. You'll have the same type of relationship between the trunk and the nose, the elephant nose. But what it is completely different is the size. If you have an idea of the form of the releases, of the form of the elephant, you might be able to make very good priorities. Maybe you would not be able to identify all the resources that you need to address the problem because the size might be completely different. But at least the measures will be dealing and attacking with the most important problem, which is the big nose, for example, or the small tail. Practicability and enforceability of the measure, we have already said some things. And the other important element to consider is that the results of inventories at this stage will not be maybe very precise or exact. Therefore, you need to take into account that some uncertainties are there with all the estimates that you are doing. Really getting into very accurate information might not be worthy, in the sense that adding more and more and more might not make any difference in the way you are planning. Therefore, it's important to really put in a balance to see how you will be addressing your future short-term and medium strategy. Here, again, some kind of priority setting ideas on how to identify the priority measures, if they're going to have a risk reduction potential or not, if they are enforceable again, and these are the type of concepts that are important to consider when you are establishing a process for priority setting. So what are the other things that you need to have in mind when you are establishing the priorities, that you need to implement them? So for that, you'll need agreement from not only from those that are going to be working on it, but from decision makers, that they might have maybe priorities that are related to other sectors of importance in your country. Therefore, agreement in the resources that will be allocated, in the people that will be allocated, should also be very important and considered. You need to implement your plan, regardless if you have resources or not. That's a question that, according to Stockholm, relates always the obligations to the availability of resources to implement the convention. In any case, the main objective of the conventions, again, is to protect human life and environment. Therefore, measures, at least very little ones, should be there in your plan. The last point here is about documenting the experience. And this is something that might not be seen as a priority when you are doing a document, but it is of extreme importance afterwards. Once you are making decisions and you are establishing certain ways of behaving or certain ways of moving forward, if you really don't explain or make the case exactly why those things were being done, the experience is lost and the knowledge goes with the consultant, or afterwards, going back, it will be or can be very hard to really understand why one option was prioritized in front of the other. Therefore, documenting experience, including the gaps and the assumptions you needed to make, is very it's an essential element of any processes when you are planning. So, as a summary, key problems need to be identified. That is something you have done with phase 2 with inventories, with taking this picture of your situation at national countries. Maybe qualitative assessment of the relevance of those POPs contained in products and articles in your country could be a second phase or a second step. If you don't have enough resources to go and consider other things, if you have already done this before, or if you have already banned certain chemicals, maybe you can go into quantitative assessments. That depends a lot on the situation at the national level. The other thing is you need to pick up the type of measures that you will need to implement. And for that, the concept is you have different lines of defenses. Which is the first line of defense? It might be, as suggested here, to prevent new POPs from coming into your borders, into your management system. It can be managing those that you have in there. Both type of measures have different implications and different resources. Sometimes the first line of defense might be done very easily with no real need of additional effort. The second line of defense, which is the management, not only of the articles or products that might be contained in this chemical, but also of the wastes, the stockpiles and the contaminated sites, might really be resource intensive. Therefore, that's why first line of defense might be easily implemented. Second line of defense might require completely different things to consider. But in any way, the idea with this is that exactly, so that you can have a step-by-step plan, jumping from one thing to the other if necessary, or if easy to implement, or if feasible or economically viable to do. At this stage, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and mainly I'd like to tell you that we are working on this issue of priority assessment and priority setting in the Secretariat, further to the information that you might find already in the guidance that is available in the websites and that have been approved before by the COPs, endorsed by the COPs. We are having a training, not this week, the week after, to really talk about it. And in here, what it is most important is not only the things that we can suggest as an idea, so the guidance is suggesting as ideas, is the experience of those that have to implement plans, that have to make priorities and the ways forward. So we welcome any inputs from your side in this regard. And of course, if you have any questions, you are also welcome to ask those questions after this presentation, or after by email. So we'll be closing my mic right now to allow you to maybe write some questions in the chat, or ask them using your mic, or think about certain issues you'd like to share with us today regarding priorities at the national level.